Picture this: a dimly lit chamber deep beneath an ancient cathedral, where the flickering glow of candles casts eerie shadows across hooded figures. They whisper in hushed tones, passing forbidden knowledge from one generation to the next, their identities hidden behind masks of secrecy. This wasn't just the stuff of legend, it was the reality for countless secret societies that thrived in the shadows of medieval Europe. These groups wielded power far beyond the public eye, shaping the course of history through clandestine meetings, coded symbols, and rituals shrouded in mystery. What drove them to operate in the dark? What secrets were they guarding or stealing? And how did their hidden influence ripple through the centuries, leaving traces we're still deciphering today? The allure of these secret societies isn't just about their mystique, it's about the tantalizing gaps in history they represent. While kings and armies fought battles in the open, these groups worked in silence, pulling strings from behind the curtain. Some sought to preserve ancient wisdom, others to amass power, and a few may have even dabbled in the forbidden arts. Think of the Knights Templar, rumored to guard relics of unimaginable power, or the Rosicrucians, whose cryptic manifestos teased enlightenment just out of reach. Their stories blur the line between fact and folklore, leaving us to wonder how much of their legacy was truth and how much was carefully crafted illusion. But this isn't just a tale of cryptic symbols and shadowy meetings. It's about the human obsession with the unknown, the lengths people will go to protect or exploit what others aren't meant to see. As we peel back the layers of time, we'll uncover the hidden networks that connected these societies, the rivalries that turned brother against brother, and the shocking truths they fought to keep buried. From whispered conspiracies in candlelit crypts to the echoes of their influence in modern secret orders, this journey will reveal how medieval Europe's most enigmatic groups shaped the world in ways you'd never expect. So lean in close, because history's greatest secrets are about to come to light. To understand why secret societies flourished in medieval Europe, we have to step back into a world teetering on chaos, where kingdoms rose and fell with the sword, and the church held both spiritual and political power with an iron grip. This was an era of upheaval where wars, plagues, and shifting allegiances left people desperate for stability or hidden avenues to influence. In the cracks of this fractured society, secret groups found their purpose, offering refuge, knowledge, and sometimes rebellion to those willing to step into the shadows. Take the Brotherhood of the Rosy Cross, whispered to have roots stretching back to ancient Egypt and the mystical teachings of Hermes Trismegistus. Legend claims this elusive order guarded alchemical secrets, promising not just the transformation of base metals into gold, but the elevation of the human soul itself. Their manifestos, appearing suddenly in the early 17th century but claiming medieval origins, spoke of a brotherhood operating in silence for centuries, initiates who could heal the sick, unlock the mysteries of nature, and even cheat death. Were they real or merely a clever myth? The truth might lie somewhere in between, a blend of fact and fantasy designed to provoke curiosity and shield their members from persecution. But why did such groups emerge now? The answer lies in the very fabric of medieval life. With the church monopolizing education and suppressing dissent, alternative ideas, whether scientific, philosophical, or spiritual, had to survive underground. Alchemists, astrologers, and heretics all faced the same threat. Discovery could mean exile, imprisonment, or worse. Secrecy wasn't just a choice, it was survival. And so, hidden beneath layers of symbolism and ritual, these societies passed down knowledge too dangerous or too valuable to share openly, yet not all were seekers of enlightenment. Some groups, like the shadowy Vehmic of Germany, operated as underground courts, delivering brutal justice outside the law. Others, like the Cathars, were branded as heretics and hunted to extinction for their unorthodox beliefs. What united them was the need to conceal their activities from authorities who saw them as threats to the established order. The deeper you dig, the clearer it becomes medieval secret societies weren't just a product of their time, they were a reaction to it, a defiant whisper against the roar of conformity. And their legacies, whether forged in wisdom or violence, still echo in the secret orders and conspiracy theories of today. No other medieval order captures the imagination quite like the Knights Templar, warrior monks who blurred the line between sacred duty and staggering ambition. Founded in the early 12th century to protect pilgrims traveling to Jerusalem, they quickly became far more than holy bodyguards. Imagine battle-hardened knights clad in white mantles emblazoned with the Crimson Cross, swearing vows of poverty while amassing unprecedented wealth. Their contradictions only deepened their mystique: pious soldiers who revolutionized finance, devout Christians accused of heresy, and legendary guardians rumored to hide relics like the Holy Grail itself. Their rise was as swift as it was improbable. From humble beginnings with just 9 knights, the Templars grew into Europe's first multinational corporation, running a primitive banking system that allowed pilgrims to deposit funds in one country and withdraw them in another. Their network of fortresses stretched from Paris to Jerusalem, and their influence reached into the courts of kings. But this power came at a price. The very innovations that made them indispensable, their secrecy, their independence from royal authority, also sowed the seeds of their downfall. Then came Friday, the 13th of October 1307, a date that would live in infamy. Without warning, King Philip IV of France ordered the mass arrest of Templars across his kingdom, charging them with blasphemy, idol worship, and unspeakable rituals. Were these accusations genuine or a ruthless king's excuse to seize their wealth? Under torture, many knights confessed to outrageous crimes, kissing the devil's back, spitting on the cross, only to recant later. The order's Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, was burned at the stake, but not before cursing the king and pope, both of whom died within a year, fueling whispers of a Templar curse. Yet their story didn't end at the pyre. Legends persist of knights escaping with shiploads of treasure, possibly even the Ark of the Covenant, hidden in remote strongholds like Scotland's Rosslyn Chapel. Some claim survivors regrouped as the Freemasons, passing down secret rites through the centuries. Whether protectors of Christendom or heretical conspirators, the Templars left a legacy that refuses to die. Proof that even the most powerful forces of the medieval world couldn't erase an idea whispered in the shadows. The disappearance of the Templars left behind more than just ruins and unanswered questions. It sparked an explosion of legends that refused to fade with time. Consider Scotland, where whispers persist that fleeing knights found sanctuary under the protection of Robert the Bruce, bringing with them sacred relics and arcane knowledge. Rosslyn Chapel, built decades after the order's suppression, teems with Templar symbolism, from stone carvings mirroring their crosses to cryptic architectural nods that fuel speculation. Could this have been a hidden stronghold, a vault guarding something far more precious than gold? Some even suggest the chapel's famous apprentice pillar conceals the Holy Grail itself, though no excavation has ever confirmed it. Yet the absence of proof only deepens the mystery, turning rumor into enduring myth. Then there's the Grail, the ultimate Templar treasure. Medieval chronicles describe the knights excavating beneath Jerusalem's Temple Mount, where they allegedly uncovered artifacts of unimaginable power. While historians debate whether they sought religious relics or ancient manuscripts, the idea of the Grail, whether a literal cup, a bloodline, or a metaphor for lost wisdom, became inseparable from their legacy. Even today, modern treasure hunters scour Templar sites across Europe, armed with old maps and ground-penetrating radar, convinced the knights hid their greatest secrets in plain sight. But perhaps the most fascinating twist is the claim that the Templars never truly vanished, they simply evolved. The Freemasons, emerging centuries later, adopted rituals and symbols eerily reminiscent of the medieval order. From the use of the square and compass to initiation ceremonies involving blindfolds and secret passwords, the parallels are striking. While Freemasonry officially denies direct descent, many lodges openly celebrate Templar heritage, even forming subgroups like the Knight Templar degree within the York Rite. Whether this represents a genuine lineage or clever myth-making remains hotly debated, but the connection has endured for centuries. Other groups, from the shadowy priory of Sion to modern chivalric orders, also lay claim to the Templar mantle, each offering their own interpretation of the Knight's lost legacy. What unites them is the allure of the unfinished story, a tale of power, persecution, and secrets too potent to disappear. The Templars may have been crushed in the 14th century, but their mythos thrives, proof that some histories aren't written in ink, but in whispers passed down through the ages. And in those whispers, the line between fact and legend blurs, leaving us to wonder, did the order truly fall, or did they simply retreat deeper into the shadows? High atop the craggy peaks of the Alborz Mountains, hidden fortresses clung to the cliffs like nests of stone eagles, impregnable strongholds where the Nizari Ismailis, better known as the Assassins, plotted their next strike. These weren't just warriors, they were masters of psychological warfare, wielding daggers and terror with equal precision. While Europe had its Templars, the Islamic world trembled before this secretive sect, whose operatives could infiltrate the most guarded courts and strike with chilling efficiency. Their reputation was so fearsome that even the great Saladin, conqueror of Jerusalem, reportedly slept in a specially armored tent after surviving 2 assassination attempts. But who were these shadow warriors, and how did they command such unwavering loyalty? The name assassin itself is shrouded in myth, likely derived from hashashin, a term whispered by their enemies, implying they were drugged with hashish to fuel their fanaticism. Marco Polo's tales only deepened the legend, describing a secret garden where initiates were drugged, awakened in a paradise of wine and avarice, and then told they'd glimpsed the afterlife, rewarded only if they obeyed their master's deadly orders. Yet historians argue this was likely sensationalized fiction, a way to demonize a group that thrived on mystery. The truth, though no less extraordinary, reveals a far more calculated strategy. The assassins' power lay not in drugs, but in their fortress network, remote citadels like Alamut, the Eagle's Nest, where sheer cliffs made invasion impossible. From these heights, they controlled valleys and trade routes, demanding tribute through fear alone. Their operatives, known as fidei, were often highly educated, fluent in multiple languages, and trained to blend seamlessly into enemy courts. When they struck, it was never in secret. Their killings were public, theatrical, designed to send a message. A sultan might wake to find a dagger plunged into his pillow beside a note, proof his life was forfeit if he crossed them. What's most fascinating is how the assassins weaponized perception. They let rumors of their invincibility spread, knowing terror was sharper than any blade. Even as Mongol armies eventually crushed their strongholds in the 13th century, their legacy endured, not just in the tales of drugged fanatics, but as pioneers of asymmetric warfare. Today, their name echoes in modern intelligence agencies, a reminder that sometimes the deadliest weapon isn't steel, but the myth that precedes it. When Crusaders first encountered the Hashashin in the Holy Land, they didn't just face an enemy, they met a legend in the making. Stories of the assassins' near-mythic precision spread like wildfire through European camps, twisted by fear and embellished with each retelling. Chroniclers like William of Tyre painted them as demonic fanatics, their loyalty bought by drugs and their blades guided by dark magic. This wasn't just battlefield gossip, it was psychological warfare turned against its creators. The Crusaders, already steeped in tales of sorcery and divine intervention, weaponized the assassin's reputation, using it to explain their own defeats. How could they triumph against men who could vanish into thin air or strike a king in his own tent? But the real power of these stories wasn't in their accuracy, it was in their utility. European rulers quickly grasped the value of cultivating such an aura of terror. By the 14th century, whispers of secretive, knife-wielding brotherhoods began surfacing in royal courts. The Venetian Council of Ten, for example, employed professional assassins with a chilling efficiency that echoed the Hashashin's methods. Even the infamous Borgias, centuries later, were accused of borrowing from the assassin playbook, eliminating rivals with poison so subtle that death seemed like acts of God. The Hashashin's legacy didn't stop at politics. Their imagery seeped into European folklore, morphing into archetypes of shadowy killers and master conspirators. The word assassin itself entered European languages, stripped of its original context but dripping with menace. Romanticized in Dante's Inferno and demonized in church sermons, they became a byword for subterfuge, their name invoked to discredit enemies or justify crackdowns on dissent. Perhaps most intriguing is how their tactics resurfaced in later secret societies. The Freemasons, though peaceful in principle, were accused of similar clandestine networks and ritual loyalty oaths, echoes of the fears Crusaders had once projected onto the East. Even the Illuminati, centuries later, borrowed the allure of invisible influence, proving that terror, once mythologized, never truly fades. It simply finds new shadows to inhabit. What began as a Crusader exaggeration became a self-fulfilling prophecy. Europe didn't just fear the assassins, it adopted their legend, refining it into a tool of power. And in doing so, it ensured that a sect of mountain warriors from Persia would haunt the Western imagination for centuries, long after their fortresses had crumbled to dust. In the sun-baked hills of southern France, a radical spiritual movement quietly took root, one so threatening to medieval orthodoxy that it sparked the only crusade ever launched against fellow Christians. The Cathars, known also as the Albigensians, rejected the material world as a creation of an evil demiurge, preaching that salvation came through secret knowledge and ascetic purity. Unlike the Church's opulent cathedrals, their perfecti, dressed in simple black robes, renounced marriage and property, and shared a ritual called the consolamentum, a baptism not by water but by the Holy Spirit. To their followers, this was a return to Christ's true teachings. To Rome, it was heresy of the highest order, a poison needing eradication. The Church's response was nothing short of apocalyptic. In 1209, Pope Innocent III declared the Albigensian Crusade, offering indulgences to any knight who would purge the land of the pestilence. What followed was a slaughter so brutal it reshaped the region forever. At Béziers, when a soldier asked how to distinguish Cathars from Catholics, the papal legate reportedly snarled, "Kill them all." God will know his own. The city burned, its thousands massacred. Over decades, entire towns were emptied, their lands given to northern nobles who carved out fiefdoms in blood. The crusade wasn't just a war, it was a colonization, erasing a culture under the banner of faith. Yet the Cathars' defiance became legendary. Their final stronghold, the fortress of Montségur, perched like an eagle's eyrie atop a jagged peak, held out for months under siege. When it fell in 1244, over 200 perfecti walked willingly into the flames rather than renounce their beliefs, but whispers persist that not all was lost. On the night before the surrender, 4 climbers allegedly slipped down the cliff face carrying a mysterious treasure. Some say sacred texts, others claim the Holy Grail itself. To this day, treasure hunters scour the ruins, drawn by riddles like the Cathar cross etched into the rock, pointing toward hidden caves. Modern historians debate whether the Cathar treasure was gold, knowledge, or merely myth. But the real prize might have been their unbroken spirit. In remote Pyrenean villages, traces of their dualist beliefs lingered for centuries, woven into folklore and whispered rituals. Even now, their story haunts the Languedoc, a testament to the power of ideas that refuse to die no matter how fiercely the flames try to consume them. The flames that consumed the last Cathar perfecti at Montségur didn't just extinguish lives, they ignited a legend. Within decades, their story became entangled with Europe's most enduring mystery, the Holy Grail. Troubadours began weaving tales of a sacred vessel hidden in the Pyrenees, guarded by heretics who'd rather die than reveal its location. But this wasn't the Grail of Arthurian romance, it was something darker, more subversive. Some whispered it held the bloodline of Christ himself, smuggled from Jerusalem and protected by the Cathars as the true heirs of a forbidden gospel. This idea took root in the 20th century with books like Holy Blood, Holy Grail, which claimed the Cathars were part of a secret lineage stretching back to Mary Magdalene, guarded by shadowy groups like the Priory of Sion. The theory spun a seductive web one that linked the ruins of Montségur to Rennes-le-Château, where a priest allegedly discovered parchments proving the survival of Christ's bloodline. Never mind that the Priory of Sion was later exposed as a 20th century hoax, the connection felt eerily plausible. After all, the Cathars had revered Mary Magdalene as a spiritual leader, rejecting the Church's portrayal of her as a repentant sinner. To them, she may have symbolized divine wisdom or, as conspiracy theorists insisted, the matriarch of a hidden dynasty. Yet the Grail's link to the Cathars runs deeper than modern myth-making. Medieval texts like Wolfram von Eschenbach's Parzival describe the Grail not as a cup, but as a stone echoing the Cathar belief in a celestial paradise untouched by the corrupt material world. Their consolamentum ritual, which channeled the Holy Spirit directly to the believer, mirrors Grail legends where only the purest could perceive the sacred object. Even their persecution fits the pattern. Like the Templars, the Cathars became martyrs to a truth too dangerous for the establishment to tolerate. What makes their Grail connection so haunting is the unresolved question at its heart. When those four climbers fled Montségur, what did they carry? Sacred texts challenging church doctrine, a literal relic like the Shroud of Turin, or nothing at all, just the unyielding hope that their faith would outlast the fires? The answer may lie not in treasure, but in symbolism. The Cathars' Grail wasn't gold or bloodline. It was the radical idea that divinity couldn't be controlled by any institution. And that, perhaps, was the most dangerous secret of all. Hidden in the candlelit workshops of medieval Europe, where the scent of sulfur and crushed herbs clung to the air, a different kind of scholar bent over bubbling alembics and cryptic manuscripts. These weren't just early chemists, they were hermeticists, disciples of the legendary Hermes Trismegistus, a figure said to be part god, part philosopher, who bridged the wisdom of ancient Egypt with the mysteries of the Greeks. His teachings, preserved in texts like the Emerald Tablet, promised something extraordinary, the secrets of the universe itself, hidden in symbols and allegories. As above, so below, the tablet proclaimed a mantra that linked the movements of stars to the workings of the human soul. For those who dared to decipher it, the reward wasn't just gold, but the transformation of the seeker into something akin to a god. At the heart of this movement stood figures like Albertus Magnus, a Dominican bishop whose reputation straddled the line between saint and sorcerer. By day, he was a respected theologian. By night, he allegedly crafted a mechanical head made of brass that could speak prophecies. His pupil, Thomas Aquinas, reportedly smashed the creation in terror, fearing its knowledge came from darker forces. Whether fact or fiction, the story captures the tension of the era where a single step too far into experimentation could brand you a heretic. The Hermeticists' workshops were battlegrounds of belief. In one corner, an alchemist might labor over a furnace, convinced that lead could be reborn as gold through spiritual purity as much as chemical precision. Nearby, an astrologer mapped celestial movements onto human fate, while a Kabbalist whispered incantations over Hebrew letters, believing their shapes held the power to reshape reality. These weren't hobbies, they were acts of rebellion. The Church condemned their practices as witchcraft, but the Hermeticists saw themselves as inheritors of a sacred tradition, preserving truths the world wasn't ready to accept. Their greatest weapon was obscurity. Manuscripts were written in riddles. Recipes for the philosopher's stone spoke of the green lion devouring the sun, code for chemical processes few could decipher. A drawing of a serpent swallowing its tail wasn't just an image, it was the Ouroboros, a symbol of eternal cycles central to their cosmology. Even their labs were designed to mislead. A furnace might sit beside an altar, blending science and ritual to confound spies. Yet for all their secrecy, their influence was undeniable. The symbols they teased from old texts found their way into Renaissance art, the scientific method, even modern psychology. Carl Jung would later study their work, seeing in their quest for transformation a mirror of the human psyche. Today, we dismiss their obsession with turning lead into gold, but their real pursuit was always more profound, the alchemy of the mind, the transmutation of ignorance into enlightenment. And in that, perhaps, they succeeded beyond their wildest dreams. The alchemists of medieval Europe didn't just mix potions, they spoke in riddles, crafting manuscripts so deliberately obscure that even today, scholars debate their true meaning. Take the Rosarium Philosophorum, a 15th-century text filled with cryptic illustrations of kings and queens dissolving in fluid, only to emerge reborn. To the uninitiated, it looked like madness, but to those who understood the code, it was a step-by-step guide to spiritual transformation disguised as a recipe for turning base metals into gold. This was the alchemist's tightrope, how to preserve ancient wisdom under the watchful eyes of a church that branded such pursuits as heresy. Their greatest obsession, the philosopher's stone, wasn't just a mythic substance for creating wealth. It symbolized perfection itself, a key to unlocking immortality and divine knowledge. The hunt for it spanned generations, with master alchemists like Nicholas Flamel allegedly discovering its secrets in a mysterious book bought from a shadowy stranger. Flamel's sudden wealth and rumored immortality only fed the legend, though historians now suspect his story was embellished by later admirers. Yet even the doubters can't explain the strange symbols carved into his Parisian house, matching alchemical diagrams precisely. Coincidence or proof, he knew more than he let on. What's often overlooked is how these secret networks operated. Alchemists didn't work in isolation, they were part of a sprawling, underground web of knowledge. A monk in Spain might send coded letters to a friar in Prague, using ink that vanished unless heated. Recipes for the green lion or the marriage of sun and moon weren't just poetic flourishes, they were survival tactics. If a manuscript fell into the wrong hands, the church would see only gibberish, while initiates recognized instructions for distilling mercury or purifying antimony. The church's crackdowns only drove these circles deeper underground. In 1487, Pope Innocent VIII issued a bull condemning alchemical practices, forcing adepts to hide behind layers of symbolism. A painting of Saint Christopher might secretly depict the alchemical process of dissolution, while cathedral gargoyles occasionally hid hermetic glyphs in plain sight. Even seemingly innocent works like Chaucer's Canterbury Tales wove alchemical metaphors into stories of pilgrims and redemption. But the most fascinating twist. Some alchemists weren't rebels at all, they were church insiders. Cardinals like Francesco Borgia dabbled in the art, and the Vatican's own archives contain encrypted alchemical texts. This duality reveals the era's tension, public condemnation masking private curiosity. After all, if alchemy could truly transmute matter, wouldn't that prove God's creation was more malleable than anyone dared admit? By the Renaissance, these coded networks had seeded something revolutionary. The same methods used to hide alchemical secrets, observation, experimentation, symbolism, laid the groundwork for modern science. Isaac Newton spent decades decoding alchemical manuscripts, believing they held truths physics couldn't yet explain. In the end, the philosopher's stone remained elusive, but the quest for it transformed something far greater. The human mind's capacity to question, to explore, and to see the world not as it was but as it might become. Deep in the misty forests of Germany and Bohemia, where the roots of ancient oaks twisted like old veins beneath the soil, a secretive brotherhood moved silently between the trees. They called themselves the Brotherhood of the Green Cross, not knights or scholars, but keepers of a different kind of wisdom. While other societies hoarded gold or power, these men and women guarded something far more fragile: the living knowledge of plants passed down through generations like a sacred trust. Their emblem, a verdant cross woven from oak leaves, symbolized a truth few in medieval Europe dared to voice: that nature itself was divine, and to harm it was to wound the very fabric of creation. Unlike the Templars or the Assassins, the Green Cross left no fortresses behind, only whispers in herbals and the stubborn survival of remedies that defied church-sanctioned medicine. Apothecaries who knew too much spoke of a hidden network of healers who could cure fevers with rare mosses, stop bleeding with fungi found only under lightning-struck trees, and even induce visions with a peculiar golden mushroom. But their greatest secret wasn't just healing, it was sabotage. Chronicles from the Black Forest tell of loggers' axes mysteriously blunting overnight, of noblemen's hunting parties led in circles by unseen guides, and of entire stands of marked trees found felled by storms, yet never a drop of rain had fallen. The church dismissed them as pagan holdouts clinging to old ways in the face of progress, but the Brotherhood's true heresy ran deeper. They operated on a radical belief that forests were not mere resources but living entities with rights. This idea, alien to a world that saw wilderness as something to conquer, made them dangerous. When Cistercian monks began clear-cutting woodlands for their monasteries, reports surfaced of poisoned sores and strange fires that burned only the monks' storehouses, leaving sacred buildings untouched. The message was clear: harm the green and the green would answer. Yet what makes the Brotherhood truly fascinating isn't just their defiance, it's how they weaponized knowledge. Their illuminated manuscripts, like the Grimorium Virides, weren't spellbooks but precise ecological records. Detailed moon cycles dictated when bark could be harvested without killing trees. Star charts marked seasons when certain herbs held peak potency. Some scholars believe this was Europe's first systematic conservation effort, disguised as mysticism to avoid persecution. Even their rituals, like marrying young saplings to ensure a forest's future, blended science with symbolism. The last documented sighting came in 1521, when a woodsman testified to seeing robed figures vanishing into the mist after sabotaging a merchant's timber raft. But walk the backwoods of Bavaria today, and you might still hear the old saying, "The Green Cross sleeps but never dies." Whether myth or memory, their legacy endures wherever ancient trees stand untouched, as if some unseen hand still shields them from the axe. Perhaps the greatest secret the Brotherhood kept wasn't how to fight for the forest, but how to make the forest fight for itself. Beneath the bustling market squares of medieval Europe, where merchants haggled over silks and spices in the open air, another kind of exchange was happening in locked chambers above the shops, one that required not coin but oath sworn in darkness. Guild halls, though celebrated as precursors to modern unions, often functioned as something far more clandestine. Their apprentices didn't just learn to carve stone or stitch leather. They underwent rituals worthy of any secret society, complete with blindfolds, symbolic deaths, and rebirths into the mysteries of their craft. The stonemasons, whose legacy would later merge with the Freemasons, were particularly notorious. To enter their ranks wasn't just about skill, it was about proving you could keep the most dangerous secret of all: how geometry, the language of God, could elevate mere laborers into architects of the divine. At first glance, guilds were pragmatic institutions, regulating everything from wages to quality control. But their bylaws reveal a darker edge. The penalty for revealing trade secrets wasn't just expulsion. It could be a severed hand or worse, as seen in the Strasbourg stonemasons' codes of 1459. Why such brutality over something as mundane as mortar recipes? Because these weren't just recipes, they were power. A master glassmaker's formula for crimson, stained glass jealously guarded by the Guild of the Holy Blood in Venice, could turn a cathedral window into a beacon of divine light, ensuring patronage from bishops and kings alike. Knowledge was currency and guilds were its vaults. The rituals cemented this exclusivity. Initiates into the Parisian Guild of the Shepherds, for instance, were led blindfolded through a labyrinth of sheepfolds, then tasked with separating black wool from white in total darkness, a test of tactile skill and mental discipline. Succeed, and you'd earn the right to wear the guild's silver crook pin. Fail, and you'd be left in the metaphorical wilderness. Similar rites flourished among the English woolmen, whose mystery plays weren't just performances but encoded lessons in dye chemistry and textile trade routes. To outsiders, it was theater. To members, it was survival. But the most fascinating twist came when guilds collided with outright heresy. The Cathar weavers of Lyon, though condemned by the church, thrived for decades because their guild structure provided a ready-made underground network. Their craft secrets included dualist prayers hidden in weaving patterns, detectable only to those who knew how to count the threads. Likewise, the Bavarian Order of the Golden Potters, officially a ceramics guild, was accused of embedding alchemical symbols into their glazes, turning humble dinnerware into hermetic textbooks for those who could read the designs. By the Renaissance, the line between guild and cult had blurred beyond recognition. When the Freemasons emerged from the ruins of operative stonemason guilds, they carried forward not just tools but the old rituals, now stripped of practical craft and steeped in symbolism. The compass and square, once used to measure stone, became emblems of moral boundaries. The blindfolded initiation, once a test of tactile skill, transformed into a metaphor for spiritual enlightenment. What began as protection for tradesmen had evolved into something far more profound. The idea that every craft, no matter how humble, held a spark of the sacred if you knew where to look. Under the moonlit oaks of Westphalia, where shadows stretched like clutching fingers, men cloaked in black gathered in silence. These were no ordinary outlaws, they were the judges and executioners of the Vehmic Courts, a secret judicial system that held the power of life and death over medieval Germany. Their name alone struck terror. Vehm, derived from the old Saxon word for punishment, whispered in taverns like a curse. Imagine a world where justice wasn't delivered in sunlit courtrooms, but in hidden clearings at midnight, where the accused stood before hooded figures who could condemn them with a single word. No witnesses, no appeals, just the rustle of leaves and the ominous creak of a rope swaying from a nearby branch. The court's origins are as murky as their verdicts. Some trace them back to Charlemagne, who allegedly established them to enforce order in unstable borderlands. Others claim they emerged from older Saxon tribal traditions, where elders resolved disputes under sacred trees. By the 13th century, their influence had spread like roots through the soil of German society. Kings and bishops officially sanctioned them, yet even those rulers feared their unchecked power. To be summoned before a Vehmic court wasn't just a trial, it was an abduction. Defendants were dragged blindfolded to remote locations, their hands bound with cords woven from hanged men's hair. The judges, known as Freischöfen, identified themselves not by faces but by secret signs. A knife left on a threshold, a chalk mark on a door, or the haunting call of an owl at dusk. What made the Vehmic courts truly chilling was their efficiency. Evidence was scarce, confessions often coerced, and sentences carried out before dawn. The condemned might find themselves dangling from an oak before their family even knew they were missing. Yet this wasn't mere lawlessness, it was a perverse form of order. In a land where bandit lords ruled the roads and local magistrates could be bribed, the Vehmic courts offered a brutal solution. Farmers whispered of corrupt nobles found dead with a slip of parchment pinned to their chests, a single letter, W for whistle, the mark of the Vehm. Even the mighty Teutonic knights tread carefully in Westphalia, knowing the Freischöfen could reach anyone, anywhere, but were they protectors or predators? The courts claimed to uphold divine justice, yet their methods reeked of tyranny. A merchant might be hanged for usury, while a rival's stolen lands were conveniently restored to a Vehmic ally. Their symbol, a dagger crossed with a rope, spoke volumes. This wasn't justice balanced on scales, but violence cloaked in ceremony. By the 16th century, their excesses had sparked revolt. Towns began refusing entry to Freischafen, and Martin Luther himself denounced them as devils in judges' robes. Yet their legacy endured in Germany's collective memory, a reminder that when law goes underground, it doesn't disappear, it simply takes on a darker shape. Perhaps the most unsettling question isn't how they operated, but why they lasted so long. The answer lies in the human hunger for certainty. In a chaotic world, the Vehmic Courts offered a grim promise: someone was always watching. Today, their ghost lingers in our fascination with secret tribunals and extrajudicial justice, proof that the line between order and oppression is often just a noose's width thin. By the dawn of the 16th century, the Vehmic Courts were stumbling toward their inevitable end, but not without leaving claw marks across history. As centralized governments grew stronger, the idea of secret tribunals operating beyond royal authority became intolerable. Cities like Cologne began posting guards to bar Freischafen from entering, while pamphlets circulated detailing their atrocities. Yet what's fascinating isn't their collapse, but how their specter lingered, shape-shifting into new forms. When Martin Luther nailed his 95 Theses to Wittenberg's door, he wasn't just challenging the church, he was striking at systems of hidden power like the Vehme, calling them Satan's own courts. But even as the last Freischafen faded into obscurity, their methods didn't. The secret signs, the midnight trials, the fear of unseen judges, these themes resurfaced in fraternal orders like the Freemasons. Early Masonic rituals borrowed eerily from Vehmic traditions, including symbolic nooses and blindfolded initiations. Some historians argue this wasn't coincidence. Disbanded Freischafen, stripped of legal immunity, may have sought refuge in emerging guilds, bringing their clandestine practices with them. The infamous W symbol even reappeared in 18th century Germany, scratched onto the doors of corrupt officials by vigilantes claiming to be the Vehme reborn. Conspiracy theories flourished. Napoleonic spies reported whispers of a Black Vehme sabotaging French supply lines during the occupation of Westphalia. Later, Weimar-era paramilitaries adopted the name, terrorizing political opponents with methods straight from the medieval playbook. Even today, far-right groups in Germany occasionally invoke the Freischafen as symbols of pure justice, twisting history to fit modern agendas. But the most persistent legend is that the Vehme never truly disbanded, it merely retreated deeper into the shadows. In 1984, a cache of 14th century documents surfaced in a Dortmund attic, allegedly detailing a splinter group that survived into the Renaissance. Skeptics dismiss it as forgery, but the paper's descriptions of initiation rites match period accounts with unsettling accuracy. Whether myth or reality, the Vehme's legacy endures as a cautionary tale. When justice operates in darkness, it's hard to tell the judges from the monsters. And in an age of surveillance and secrecy, that line feels thinner than ever. In the autumn of 1614, the streets of Kassel buzzed with rumors about a strange pamphlet circulating among scholars, a document that would ignite Europe's imagination for centuries. Titled Fama Fraternitatis, it told of a mysterious order known as the Brotherhood of the Rosy Cross, founded by a shadowy figure named Christian Rosenkreutz. According to the text, Rosenkreutz had traveled to the east, uncovering esoteric secrets from Arabia and the mystical city of Damascus before returning to establish a hidden society of enlightened healers. The manifesto claimed these Rosicrucians could cure any disease, transmute metals, and even communicate with angels. But they operated in total secrecy, revealing themselves only when the world was ready. What made the Fama truly explosive were its apocalyptic undertones. It hinted at an imminent reformation of science, religion, and politics, a new golden age heralded by the Brotherhood's wisdom. To a Europe still reeling from the Protestant Reformation and the 30 Years' War, This wasn't just philosophy, it was dynamite. Within months, 2 more manifestos appeared: the Confessio Fraternitatis and the Chemical Wedding of Christian Rosencreutz, each layering deeper symbolism into the mythos. The Confessio spoke of a universal reformation that would topple corrupt institutions, while the Chemical Wedding wove alchemical allegory into a fantastical tale of Rosencreutz attending a royal wedding in a magical castle, complete with talking lions and celestial brides. Scholars tore into the texts, desperate to uncover the truth. Were these medieval traditions repackaged for a new era or an elaborate hoax? The Rosicrucians' purported origins: Rosencreutz's tomb, allegedly discovered centuries after his death and adorned with glowing lamps and cryptic inscriptions, smacked of Templar legends. Their emphasis on alchemy and Hermeticism echoed the secret societies of the Renaissance, yet the manifesto's timing suggested something more calculated. The early 17th century was a powder keg of scientific revolution, with figures like Galileo challenging old worldviews. By positioning themselves as mediators between ancient wisdom and modern discovery, the Rosicrucians, real or not, offered a tantalizing bridge. The reaction was pandemonium. Some, like the philosopher Descartes, embarked on futile quests to find the Brotherhood. Others accused the Rosicrucians of being Jesuit spies or Lutheran radicals. A London publisher even printed a fake Rosicrucian confession, claiming the order had members in every European court. But the most intriguing response came from those who claimed the manifestos were allegorical, not announcing a physical brotherhood, but inviting readers to become Rosicrucians through spiritual alchemy. By the 18th century, the myth had taken on a life of its own. Freemasons incorporated Rosicrucian symbolism into their rites, while occultists like Eliphas Levi wove the legend into their magical systems. Today, the question remains: were the manifestos a medieval echo, a literary prank, or the first shot in a secret war for the soul of the Enlightenment? The answer might lie in their enduring appeal, proof that the right story, whispered at the right time, can reshape the world. The Rosicrucian manifestos didn't just spark curiosity, they ignited a firestorm at the very moment Europe stood on the precipice of scientific revolution. When Descartes set off across Germany in 1619, ostensibly to study the world's books, contemporaries whispered he was actually searching for the elusive Brotherhood. The philosopher's private notebooks revealed tantalizing clues, pages filled with geometric diagrams alongside alchemical symbols, mirroring the Rosicrucian blend of mathematics and mysticism. Like many thinkers of his era, Descartes seemed torn between two worlds, one governed by cold logic, the other whispering promises of hidden knowledge that could unlock nature's deepest secrets. This tension between ancient wisdom and new science defined the age. The Rosicrucian manifestos didn't reject empirical inquiry, they reframed it as part of a grander quest. Consider the case of Robert Fludd, a London physician who boldly claimed the human body was a microcosm of the universe, its rhythms mirroring planetary movements. Though ridiculed by establishment figures, his ideas found eager readers among secretive circles where Rosicrucian texts circulated. Fludd's medicine blended herbal remedies with celestial harmonics, a living example of how mystical traditions could inform cutting-edge science. When Galileo faced the Inquisition for his heretical astronomy, some wondered if his telescopic discoveries aligned a little too neatly with Rosicrucian prophecies of a new celestial light. Even Isaac Newton, the crown jewel of the scientific revolution, spent more time decoding alchemical manuscripts than writing his Principia. His secretive experiments with mercury and antimony weren't eccentric hobbies. They were attempts to uncover what he called the vegetable spirit, a life force Rosicrucians believed permeated all matter. The line between genius and mystic blurred in his private chambers, where calculus equations shared parchment with arcane symbols copied from a smuggled Rosicrucian tract. Newton's obsessive search for the philosopher's stone wasn't just about gold. It was about uncovering the divine architecture of creation itself. The Rosicrucian vision of science as sacred exploration left fingerprints across emerging disciplines. In Prague, the imperial astronomer Johannes Kepler, whose laws of planetary motion reshaped cosmology, drew inspiration from the city's thriving occult underground. His mother's trial for witchcraft only deepened his fascination with hidden forces, leading him to ponder whether musical harmonies governed the spacing of planets, an idea straight from Hermetic texts the Rosicrucians revered. Meanwhile, in underground labs from Paris to Krakow, early chemists began systematizing their work, not as opponents of mysticism but as its heirs. The glass beakers and precise measurements of figures like Jan Baptist van Helmont didn't replace alchemy, they weaponized it, turning cryptic recipes into repeatable experiments. What made the Rosicrucian influence so potent was its timing. The 17th century's upheavals, the 30 Years' War tearing through Germany, the collapse of medieval certainties created a hunger for synthesis. Francis Bacon's New Atlantis, with its vision of scientist priests in a utopian society, reads like a Rosicrucian blueprint sanitized for mainstream acceptance. When the Royal Society formed in London in 1660, its founders included men who dabbled in Hermeticism, their motto, nullius in verba, take nobody's word for it, echoing the Rosicrucian call to test ancient claims through experience. The real legacy of this collision between mysticism and science might lie in what it reveals about knowledge itself. The Rosicrucians' greatest trick wasn't their alleged immortality or gold-making. It was convincing generations that the boundaries between disciplines were illusions. When a young Gottfried Leibniz developed calculus while corresponding with alchemists, or when Paracelsus pioneered chemotherapy using principles from medieval grimoires, they proved that progress often wears disguises. The light of reason, it turns out, burns brightest when fed by many flames, some flickering in temple sanctums, others in the clean glass of a laboratory flask. In the bustling market squares of 13th century Bruges and Paris, groups of women dressed in simple grey robes moved with quiet purpose. They weren't nuns bound by cloistered vows, nor were they ordinary townsfolk. These were the Beguines, a radical sisterhood that defied the rigid categories of medieval society. Unlike traditional monastic orders, they took no permanent vows, could leave to marry, and supported themselves through weaving, teaching, and caring for the sick. But their greatest rebellion wasn't how they lived, it was how they spoke. In an era when women's voices were meant to be silent, the Beguines wrote rapturous accounts of divine visions, their words dripping with such intimate longing for God that even priests blushed. To their followers, they were living saints. To the church, they were a ticking time bomb. At the heart of this movement stood figures like Hadewich of Antwerp, whose poetry burned with unbridled passion. "Love has subjugated me," she wrote, describing Christ as a knight who wounded her soul so deeply that the wound would never heal. Another Beguine, Marguerite Porete, went even further. Her book, The Mirror of Simple Souls, claimed that the devout could merge so completely with God that they no longer needed the Church's sacraments, a notion so dangerous that she was burned at the stake in 1310. Yet copies of her work survived, hidden in libraries and passed hand to hand like contraband. Authorities couldn't decide what frightened them more, the Beguines' theology or the fact that illiterate women were quoting it in back alleys. The real threat, however, wasn't mysticism, it was autonomy. Beguine communities, called beguinages, were self-governing enclaves where women managed property, educated girls, and made decisions without male oversight. In cities like Cologne, their walled compounds resembled miniature towns, complete with workshops, infirmaries, and ornate chapels. For many women, joining a beguinage was the only alternative to marriage or a convent. But to suspicious bishops, these independent women were a virus in the body of Christendom. By the 14th century, the Church launched brutal crackdowns, branding Beguines as heretics for everything from refusing to marry to excessive prayer. Yet their legacy proved harder to erase than parchment. Some beguinages survived for centuries by outwardly conforming while preserving their ways in secret. Others inspired later movements, Quaker women's meetings, and even early feminist collectives drew unknowing inspiration from their model. Today, scholars still pore over Beguine writings, marveling at how these women crafted a spiritual language that bypassed clerical authority entirely. Perhaps their most subversive act wasn't in dying for their beliefs, but in proving that faith, like freedom, could flourish even in the cracks of oppression. The quiet rebellion of the Beguines didn't end with the last of their walled beguinages. It seeped into the spiritual DNA of Europe, resurfacing centuries later in movements that defied rigid dogma. Look closely at the Quaker women of the 17th century, standing resolutely in meeting houses as vessels of the inner light, and you'll catch echoes of those medieval mystics who claimed direct communion with the divine. The similarities aren't accidental. Early Quaker leader Margaret Fell quoted Beguine writings without realizing their origin, drawn to their radical idea that God spoke as clearly through a washerwoman as through a priest. Even the Quakers' signature, trembling, the physical shaking that earned them their name, mirrored the ecstatic trances described in Beguine manuscripts like Mechthild of Magdeburg's The Flowing Light of the Godhead. This thread continues through the Moravian Church's Singstun tradition, where women led hymn writing circles in 18th century Germany. The Moravians' emphasis on personal spiritual diaries directly channeled the Beguines' practice of recording visions, though few realized the connection. By the 19th century, the trail emerges in places like the Shaker communities of America, where women like Mother Ann Lee governed entire villages, their theology steeped in visions and divine whispers. The Shakers' famous dancing worship might seem worlds apart from the Beguines' silent meditations, but both shared a revolutionary core, the belief that women's spiritual experiences held equal weight to men's. Yet the Beguines' most profound impact might be in what historians call the hidden reformation, the slow erosion of clerical authority that paved the way for Protestantism. A century before Luther nailed his theses to the door at Wittenberg, Beguines were already bypassing priests, teaching vernacular Bible study in homes and market squares. Scholars recently uncovered links between these underground study circles and later Anabaptist groups, suggesting the Reformation's democratic spirit was born not in university debates, but in the back rooms of beguinages. Even the Catholic Church's own mystics, from Teresa of Avila to Thérèse of Lisieux, unknowingly carried the torch, their writings on the interior castle and little way resonating with Beguine themes of direct, intimate encounter with the divine. Modern spirituality owes these women an unacknowledged debt. When feminist theologians rediscovered Marguerite Porreet's Mirror of Simple Souls in the 1970s, they found startling parallels with contemporary goddess movements and ecofeminism. Porreet's description of the soul as a noble annihilated one who merges with divine love mirrors modern concepts of sacred immanence, the divine present in all things. Today's female-led meditation circles and monastic revival movements, from the Benedictine women of Santa Rita Abbey to the ecumenical Grandchamp community in Switzerland, unconsciously replicate the Beguine model, self-sufficient, egalitarian, and fiercely contemplative. Perhaps the greatest testament to their legacy isn't in institutions, but in quiet moments when a woman picks up a journal to record her prayers, or when a study group gathers outside institutional walls to wrestle with sacred texts. 700 years after the last Beguine was forced into a convent or married off, their revolution continues, not in shouted manifestos, but in the persistence of a simple idea that the divine speaks to all who listen, regardless of who grants them permission. In the shadow of the Carpathian Mountains, where mist coiled around crumbling castles like spectral fingers, an elite brotherhood of knights took vows not just to God but to hunt monsters. The Order of the Dragon, founded in 1408 by Sigismund of Luxembourg, wasn't your typical chivalric order. their emblem, a dragon with its tail coiled around its own neck, a symbol of eternal vigilance against the enemies of Christendom. But their enemies weren't just the Ottoman armies marching toward Europe's gates. Whispers followed these knights, tales of something darker lurking in the borderlands between myth and history. Among their ranks stood a man whose name would become synonymous with terror, Vlad II, father of the infamous Vlad the Impaler, and it's here, in the Order's secretive rites and bloody campaigns, that the threads of vampire folklore begin to tighten. The Order's initiation rituals read like scenes from a Gothic nightmare. New members drank wine mixed with the blood of their slain enemies, swearing to defend the cross by any means necessary. They wore black cloaks lined with red silk colors later echoed in vampire lore, and carried daggers engraved with Latin incantations against the children of darkness. Contemporary chronicles describe their midnight ceremonies in ruined chapels, where torches cast flickering shadows on walls painted with dragon motifs. To the peasants who glimpsed these processions, it wasn't clear who the real monsters were, the Ottomans beyond the border, or these spectral knights who seemed to vanish into the fog after burning villages suspected of harboring spies. Vlad II, inducted into the order in 1431, earned the surname Dracul, meaning both dragon and devil, in Romanian, a duality that would haunt his family's legacy. His son, Vlad III, later known as Dracula, inherited more than just a name. The Order's tactics, impaling enemies on stakes to sow terror, employing spies dressed as merchants to infiltrate Ottoman camps, became hallmarks of his reign. But the connection runs deeper than warfare. The Order's archives, discovered in a Transylvanian monastery in 1922, contained peculiar references to strigoi, the undead creatures of local folklore. One parchment detailed a 1443 trial where a knight was accused of using unholy arts to interrogate a prisoner by draining his blood, an act disturbingly similar to later vampire legends. Why would a Christian order dabble in such imagery? The answer lies in psychological warfare. The Ottomans already feared the Dracula name. The Order weaponized that terror by encouraging stories of their knights as something more than human. A surviving letter from an Ottoman officer describes encountering a black-cloaked figure near the Danube who moved without sound and left no footprints, likely a scout trained in the Order's stealth techniques, but immortalized in local lore as a vampiric sentinel. By the time Bram Stoker penned Dracula centuries later, the fragments were already in place: an aristocratic order, a blood-drinking ritual, and a family name that meant devil. Yet the Order's true legacy might be its blurring of lines between holy warrior and monster. Their last Grandmaster, Matthias Corvinus, famously displayed the mummified hand of Vlad the Impaler in his court, a relic said to twitch when enemies approached. Whether superstition or staged theater, the message was clear. Even in death, the dragon's children watched. And in that space between propaganda and nightmare, the vampire myth found its most fertile ground. The night Bram Stoker first read about Vlad the Impaler in a dusty British museum tome, history and horror collided in a way that would haunt literature forever. But what many don't realize is how deeply Stoker wove the Order of the Dragon's rituals into his vampire mythos. Take Dracula's title, the Son of the Dragon, a direct nod to Vlad's father, Vlad Dracul, whose name meant both dragon and devil. Stoker didn't just borrow a name, he repurposed an entire legacy of calculated terror. The Order's practice of displaying impaled corpses to demoralize enemies. That became Dracula's signature brutality. Their midnight ceremonies with blood-tinged wine echoed in the Count's toast to the blood that is their life. Even the black and red cloaks worn by the knights resurface in Jonathan Harker's description of Dracula's crimson-lined cape, a sartorial hint at the monster's aristocratic lineage. Stoker's genius lay in how he blurred fact and folklore. The real Order of the Dragon guarded Transylvania's mountain passes. Stoker's Dracula controls the Borgo Pass. Historical accounts describe Vlad Dracul's spies moving like shadows through Ottoman camps, mirroring the Count's ability to vanish and reappear at will. But the most chilling parallel isn't in the novel, it's in Stoker's research notes, where he scribbled a cryptic reminder: make him not merely a beast but a fallen knight. That single line unlocks everything. The historical Vlad was a crusader knight turned warlord. Stoker's Dracula is a corrupted nobleman, his once lofty vows twisted into eternal hunger. The Gothic horror tropes we associate with vampires, many were born from Stoker's embellishment of order rituals. Their initiation oaths demanded lifelong secrecy, so Dracula cannot enter a home uninvited, bound by ancient laws. The dragon emblem, symbolizing vigilance against darkness, becomes the Count's aversion to crosses. Even the stakes used to kill vampires mirror the Order's preferred execution method. But Stoker added layers the Order never could. When Dracula crawls headfirst down castle walls or commands wolves, we're seeing medieval fears of lycanthropy and black magic fused with the lingering terror of elite brotherhoods operating beyond mortal laws. This fusion of history and fiction wasn't accidental. Stoker's era was obsessed with secret societies, Freemasons, Rosicrucians, even Jack the Ripper conspiracy theories tied to occult lodges. By grafting vampirism onto a real chivalric order, he gave the monster cultural weight. A random demon might frighten, but a centuries-old aristocrat with ties to esoteric knighthood. That whispered something far more unsettling, that the greatest horrors wear crowns and speak in the measured tones of nobility. The Order's influence didn't stop with Stoker. Modern Dracula adaptations keep resurrecting its imagery, from Francis Ford Coppola's armor-clad Count reciting Crusader vows to Netflix's Castlevania depicting the Order as vampire hunters. Even the dragon symbol persists, repurposed by everything from heavy metal bands to RPG guilds. The truth lurking beneath the legend is this: Vlad's knighthood provided the perfect alchemy of credibility and dread. After all, what's scarier than a monster who believes God is on his side? High in the mountain shrines of Europe, where candlelight flickers against weathered stone, stand figures that defy expectations, dark-skinned Madonnas with inscrutable smiles, their ebony faces cradling the Christ child. These are the Black Madonnas, centuries-old statues veiled in mystery. To the faithful, they are simply representations of the Virgin Mary, aged by time or smoke. But peel back the layers and a far more intriguing story emerges. Their dark pigmentation isn't accidental, it's symbolic, rooted in pre-Christian earth goddesses like Isis and Cybele, whose worship the Church couldn't fully erase. And some whisper these statues hold another secret: coded connections to the Templars, who may have smuggled esoteric knowledge from the Holy Land hidden in plain sight. Consider the Madonna of Montserrat in Spain, her face as black as the mountain she's named after. Local tradition claims she was carved by St. Luke and brought to Spain by St. Peter, a pious tale that crumbles under scrutiny. Art historians note her 12th century origins coincide with the Templars' peak influence. Her throne bears the same geometric patterns found on Templar seals, and her crown mirrors the twin pillars of Solomon's temple. Even more telling, the shrine sits atop a network of natural caves, long associated with goddess worship. Pilgrims still crawl through the narrow, womb-like tunnel behind her altar, a ritual echoing ancient rites of rebirth tied to the Earth Mother. The Templars' fingerprints appear elsewhere. At Chartres Cathedral, home to the Black Madonna known as Notre Dame sous terre Our Lady underground, builders incorporated architectural anomalies. The labyrinth on the floor mirrors the Cretan labyrinth tied to the goddess Ariadne, while the crypt's location directly beneath the altar hints at covert veneration. Templar-funded churches across Europe follow this pattern: Black Madonnas placed where pagan goddesses were once worshipped, often near ley lines or healing springs. Why would warrior monks care about such symbolism? Because their alleged discoveries under Jerusalem's temple mount may have included more than gold, perhaps Gnostic texts equating Mary with Sophia, the divine feminine wisdom. The statue's coloration holds deeper clues. Medieval artists didn't lack pigments to paint Mary pale. They chose darkness deliberately. Some Black Madonnas were carved from rare black stone like basalt or jet, materials sacred to goddess cults. Others were called Virgins of the Groves, linking them to Diana of Ephesus, whose many-breasted statue was also black. The most provocative theory comes from alchemical manuscripts, the Nigredo stage where base matter blackens before transforming into gold. To initiates, the Black Madonna might symbolize the prima materia, the chaotic first matter awaiting spiritual refinement. This convergence of threads, earth goddesses, Templar iconography, alchemy reaches its zenith in Poland's Jasna Góra, home to the revered Black Madonna of Częstochowa. Her scars, said to be from Hussite raiders, mirror the slashes on Egyptian statues of Isis. Legend claims she was painted by Luke on a cedar table from the Holy Family's house, but radiocarbon dating places her between the 6th and 9th centuries. More intriguing, she's venerated as Queen of Poland, a title echoing the Templars' alleged underground kingdom mythos. During her 1656 coronation, King John Casimir declared her the nation's spiritual sovereign, an act mirroring the Templar belief in a sacred feminine force guiding earthly rulers. Yet the Black Madonna's greatest power lies in their duality. They are both merry and more than merry vessels of a suppressed feminine divinity draped in Christian vestments. Pilgrims leave offerings of flowers and grain at their feet, just as their ancestors did for Demeter. They whisper petitions for fertility beside altars once dedicated to Isis. And in their shadowed faces, we glimpse a truth the medieval church couldn't fully erase, that the sacred has always worn many faces, and the Divine Mother never truly vanishes. She simply waits, patient as stone, for those willing to see beyond the surface. From the soaring spires of Chartres to the remote mountain sanctuary of Montserrat, the locations of Europe's Black Madonnas form a cryptic map, one that has fueled speculation for centuries. Scholars and mystics alike have noted something uncanny. These dark-hued statues often stand atop ancient power sites where pagan goddesses were once venerated, where underground springs bubble up with mineral-rich waters, and where the earth's energy seems to hum just beneath the surface. Chartres Cathedral, for example, wasn't built on random ground. Beneath its labyrinth lies a sacred well, a remnant of druidic worship tied to the earth goddess, while the cathedral's very alignment corresponds with the summer solstice sunrise, an echo of older solar rites. The Black Madonna housed here, not a Dame Sue's tear, sits directly above this convergence as if guarding the threshold between worlds. This pattern repeats across the continent. In Poland, the Jasna Góra monastery's Black Madonna overlooks a network of limestone caves, long associated with pre-Christian Slavic earth spirits. In Switzerland, the Madonna of Einsiedeln presides over a site once sacred to the Celtic goddess Abnoba, her statue positioned where a healing spring still flows. Even Montserrat's mystical mountain, with its jagged peaks resembling sawed-off teeth, was known to the Romans as a sanctuary for Venus and later for the Virgin, an uninterrupted chain of feminine divinity. Theories about these placements range from the pragmatic to the esoteric. Some historians argue the Church strategically co-opted these sites to ease pagan conversions, transforming goddess shrines into Marian devotion centers. But others see a deeper design. Ley line enthusiasts point out that many Black Madonna sites align with so-called energy pathways, like the St. Michael ley line stretching from Ireland to Israel, intersecting with Chartres and Montserrat. Medieval builders may have recognized these invisible currents, constructing their sacred architecture to amplify them. The Templar connection adds another layer. Many Black Madonna shrines, Chartres, Rocamadour, La Païen-Velay, were waypoints on the Camino de Santiago pilgrimage route, which the Templars famously protected. Intriguingly, these sites often feature unusual architectural elements, hidden chambers, acoustically perfect vaults that produce eerie harmonics, or carvings of green men amidst Christian iconography. At Rocamada, pilgrims climb the steps of St. Michael on their knees, exactly 365 of them, mirroring the solar year. Coincidence or a coded calendar? Perhaps the most tantalizing clue comes from the statues themselves. Many Black Madonnas hold the Christ child in their left arm, a deviation from traditional depictions where he rests on the right. In esoteric traditions, the left symbolizes the intuitive, the hidden, the lunar, the realm of the divine feminine. Some statues even show the child holding a book or orb, symbols of gnosis or hidden wisdom. Taken together, these details suggest a silent rebellion, a way to encode ancient earth goddess worship within the heart of Christian devotion. Whether by sacred geometry or silent conspiracy, the Black Madonna sites endure as nodes in a vast, whispering network. They draw millions of pilgrims yet guard their secrets closely, as if the stones themselves remember what history has tried to erase. The next time you see one of these enigmatic figures, look past the darkened wood or stone. What you're really seeing is a palimpsest layer upon layer of faith, power, and something far older, written in the language of the earth itself. The year was 1212 when Europe witnessed one of the most haunting and enigmatic movements in medieval history, the Children's Crusade. Thousands of young souls, some barely past infancy, abandoned their homes and families, following visionary preachers toward the Mediterranean Sea. According to chroniclers, they believed the waters would part like the Red Sea, allowing them to reclaim Jerusalem without bloodshed. But beneath this heartbreaking tale of innocence and zeal lurks something darker, a story not just of misplaced faith, but of manipulation, mass hysteria, and perhaps even deliberate deception by shadowy figures lurking in the pulpit. At the center of this tragedy stood two charismatic figures, Nicholas of Cologne and Stephen of Cloyes. Nicholas, a German shepherd boy, claimed a divine visitor had given him a letter commanding him to lead children to the Holy Land. Stephen, a French adolescent, preached that Jesus himself had appeared to him, entrusting him with the same sacred mission. Their fervor spread like wildfire. Crowds of children, some as young as 6, flocked to them, abandoning plows and spinning wheels to join what they saw as a holy pilgrimage. But here's where the story twists. Contemporary accounts describe mysterious, gray monks moving among the children, whispering assurances and collecting alms. Were these pious supporters or something more sinister? The Church's reaction was strangely muted. While Pope Innocent III reportedly wept upon hearing of the children's march, no official order was given to stop them. Some bishops even provided supplies, while others later claimed the entire movement was the work of the devil. This contradiction raises unsettling questions. If the Church truly believed these children were divinely inspired, why no official endorsement? If they saw it as heresy, why no forceful intervention? The answer might lie in the political climate. The Albigensian Crusade was raging in southern France, and the Church needed every ounce of popular fervor it could muster, even if that meant turning a blind eye to questionable preachers whipping up zeal among the vulnerable. Then came the grim aftermath. Of the 7,000 children said to have followed Nicholas, most vanished without a trace. A handful returned years later, telling horrifying tales of betrayal ship's captains who promised free passage to Palestine only to sell them into slavery in North Africa. Stephen's followers fared no better, dispersing into oblivion, but the darkest rumors suggest an even grimmer fate. Fragmentary records from Marseille speak of secretive auctions where fair-haired stock was sold to Egyptian buyers, while a Cistercian abbot's diary cryptically notes the arrival of white-skinned laborers in Alexandria's quarries around that time. Modern historians debate whether the Children's Crusade was a true movement or a later fabrication. Medieval chronicles are notoriously prone to exaggeration. Yet the persistent details, the grey monks, the sudden fervor, the missing children hint at something more orchestrated than spontaneous piety. Could this have been a cover for human trafficking disguised as religious awakening? Or perhaps a cult-like phenomenon where charismatic leaders exploited the era's apocalyptic anxieties? The timing is suspicious. 1212 fell within a wave of millenarian panic, with many convinced the world would end in 1260. In such an atmosphere, children pure, untainted by sin, were seen as ideal vessels to usher in Christ's kingdom. What makes the Children's Crusade so chilling isn't just the tragedy, but the echoes it finds in later history. From the Pied Piper of Hamelin to the doomed People's Temple followers at Jonestown, the pattern repeats: the vulnerable led astray by voices promising salvation only to deliver ruin. The medieval world had no psychology to explain mass suggestion or cult dynamics, but their records preserve the symptoms all too well. Perhaps the real secret society here wasn't a formal order, but something far more amorphous, a network of predators hiding in plain sight, robes fluttering like vultures' wings as they moved among the faithful, harvesting not souls but lives. The shadowy intrigue of medieval secret societies hasn't faded with the centuries. It's been reborn in the glow of modern screens and bestseller lists. Take Assassin's Creed, where the Templars aren't just historical footnotes but a millennia-spanning cabal pulling strings from the Crusades to corporate boardrooms. The genius of the franchise lies in its half-truths. Yes, the real Templars were financial pioneers and political players, but Ubisoft's version turbocharges their influence, weaving them into events like the American Revolution and the Cold War. This audacious revisionism works because it taps into a deeper truth that the idea of hidden masters shaping history is always more thrilling than messy reality. Dan Brown's The Da Vinci Code took a different tack, repackaging the Priory of Sion hoax as a globe-trotting treasure hunt. Brown's blend of art, history, and conspiracy theory struck a nerve, even as scholars groaned at his creative liberties. His portrayal of the Knights Templar as guardians of Christ's bloodline borrows from real medieval heresies like the Cathars' alleged reverence for Mary Magdalene, but twists them into a modern thriller framework. What Brown gets right is the enduring allure of the forbidden knowledge trope. What he glosses over is how actual medieval secret societies were less about protecting explosive truths than surviving persecution. Then there's Game of Thrones, where the faceless men of Bravos echo the Hashashins' blend of mysticism and lethality. Their creed, "all men must die," mirrors the assassins' reputation for absolute loyalty, while their shape-shifting abilities crank the legend up to fantasy levels. Yet George R.R. Martin didn't invent this archetype. He distilled centuries of Orientalist fear mongering about the Orient's deadly fanatics, a stereotype born when Crusaders first trembled at stories of the Hashashin. Modern adaptations keep recycling this caricature, rarely acknowledging the real Nazareth's sophisticated political pragmatism. Even children's media isn't immune. The Secrets of the Immortal Nicholas Flamel series turns alchemists like Paracelsus into time-hopping superheroes. Their philosopher's stone a MacGuffin straight out of medieval manuscripts. The exaggeration here is the fun part. Real alchemists did write in riddles and guard their secrets, but they were more likely to poison themselves with mercury than battle ancient sorcerers. Still, the core idea holds. These were people who believed knowledge could transform the world, a theme that resonates in any era. What unites these fictional takes is their cherry-picking of history. They amplify the mystique of initiation rituals, the drama of hidden agendas, while downplaying the mundane realities like the Templars' bureaucratic receipts or the Rosicrucians' probable existence as a literary prank. Yet in another sense, they're truer to the medieval mindset than dry textbooks. For people in the Middle Ages, secret societies were larger than life, whether as demons in the shadows or saviors in the night. Modern pop culture just continues what illuminated manuscripts started, turning whispers into legends and legends into something we can't stop retelling. From vanished vaults of Templar gold to the whispered oaths of alchemists who claim to cheat death, medieval Europe's secret societies left behind riddles that still taunt us today. Consider the lost treasures, not just the fabled hoards of the Knights Templar, rumored hidden beneath Rosslyn Chapel or deep in the Languedoc caves, but the darker prizes. The Cathar manuscripts supposedly smuggled from Montségur before the flames took the last perfecti, or the assassin's vanished library at Alamat, said to hold poison recipes and celestial maps. Then there are the unsolved murders, whole chapters of history written in blood and silence. Who really ordered the mass arrest of the Templars on that Friday the 13th? Was it greed, fear, or something more sinister? And what of the Vehmic Courts victims, swinging from oaks with cryptic symbols carved into their flesh? Were they criminals or sacrifices in a larger game? But perhaps the most enduring mystery isn't what these groups left behind, but what they became. The Templars' legacy lives on in Freemasonry's rituals, their symbols repurposed but never fully explained. The Rosicrucian manifestos still spark debates. Were they a hoax, a call to enlightenment, or the first salvo in a secret war for the soul of the Enlightenment? Even the Beguines, those defiant sisters of the soul, never truly vanished. Their spirit flickers in every woman-led spiritual circle that dares to bypass gatekeepers. Could fragments of these societies still linger in plain sight, their rituals disguised as tradition, their power cloaked in new forms? So now we turn to you. Which of these shadowed brotherhoods and sisterhoods haunts your imagination? Are you drawn to the warrior mystics of the Knights Templar, the poison-wielding precision of the assassins, or the quiet rebellion of the Beguines? Share your theories in the comments. Could the heirs of these orders still walk among us, keeping watch over treasures and truths we've yet to uncover? The medieval world may be gone, but its secrets are far from settled. After all, history's greatest trick isn't hiding the truth, it's making us believe the story is over.